Free and clear of the chatter from Wall Street, you're listening to Talking Stocks Over Beer, hosted by hedge fund veteran and newsletter writer Mike Alkin, who helps ordinary investors level the playing field against the pros by bringing you market insights and interviews with corporate executives and institutional investors. Mike sifts through all the noise of mainstream financial media and Wall Street to help you focus on what really matters in the markets. And now, here is your host, Mike Alkin.
Welcome to the podcast. It's Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. Hope you had a good weekend. On my end, after some very serious binge watching, I finished The Blacklist. I know you've heard me talk about it the last several weeks, as I've been binge watching it along with the rest of my family, who's been doing the same. And as my teenage daughter would say, OMG, oh my God. I mean, I think this is one of the best shows I've ever seen. And James Spader, who's been an actor for years, he's my generation, his portrayal of the FBI's most wanted criminal, Raymond Reddington, is so beyond good, I can't even explain it. Just outstanding. A sociopath, murderous criminal with an endearing side. Just a fabulous show. I highly recommend watching it. It was renewed, so it's on next year. I think it starts in January again, so it's going to be a long 6 months. I'll probably have to go back and watch some of it again, but I rarely do that. I rarely spend too much time watching TV. I watch the news and I watch sports. And, Homeland is one of my favorite shows. I watch a little bit of Billions. Oh, that kind of bores me. It's okay. But this one is just fantastic. So anyway, my weekend, like I said, good to usual. This time of year, you'll hear me talk about the lacrosse field. But again, completely just downpoured. 3 games on Saturday. I was waterlogged, just standing on the sideline. It was a lot of fun, though. And I have to tell you, for those of you who have kids or if you have nephews, nieces, I mean, it's neat to see the kids grow up, right? You see their skills increase each year. Now my guy's 12, and I remember just a few years ago watching them play lacrosse 4 or 5 years ago. It was like watching Little League. It was, throwing and catching was a chore. And they couldn't do it. But now, I mean, they're like little machines out there. They really play at a high level. And, I played baseball, football, and hockey. I didn't play lacrosse growing up. So it's new to me the last 4 or 5 years. But the town I live in is a dominant lacrosse town going back for decades. And, I mean, the high school just feeds kids into Division I programs, top programs all the time. And, just to make the team is really hard for a lot of these kids. But it's a great program, and it's nice because the dads who coach it up to about the up to the 8th in the summer programs and the town league and then the travel teams. The kids play at the middle school and the high school, but in the town and summer leagues and travel team, the dads coach and. Most of these guys played at very high levels. My son's coach was a 4-time All-American at the University of Virginia. And what's nice about that is these guys don't live vicariously through their kids. They've been there, done that. They have nothing to prove. So it's a nice part of youth sports. We play some towns with some programs that are okay. They're trying and the parents are out of their minds. I'm on these sidelines all the time and I listen to them and they're just out of control. And at this age, at 11, at 12, even at 10, they're going back trying to position their kids to get on this travel team or that travel team. Hopefully they get to college. I mean, the pressure they put on them, it's absolutely insane. So, you got to keep it all in perspective. And we're lucky to live in a town where it is put in perspective. So a lot of fun. My wife and kids are going away this week to Disney. I'm staying home. I know what you're thinking. Poor Mike. But I share with you a little Disney experience I had a while back. So I'm probably going back 6 or 7 years now. And, I travel a lot. And as a hedge fund analyst, I was a PM and a partner at different points in my career and always on the road. Probably, 70% of the time I travel during the week. And it takes a toll. But you've got to go research companies, you got to go research industries and sectors. So do a lot of traveling. And I was in the UK where I probably, for the last decade, probably spent 2 to 3 months of a year there. Did a lot of European and UK investing. And so 6-7 years ago, I had a quick trip there. I was going up to Glasgow, then going over to visit a company and a couple of companies in Ireland, and then heading back to London. So 3 days in and out. So I normally, if I go for a week or 7 or 8 days, I'd normally bring, a suitcase with me, and you learn to travel light, but workout clothes, whatever it was, but not this time. This time, no casual clothes, nothing. I brought a suit and I brought shoes, and that was it. Suit, ties, and shoes. One suit, another pair of slacks, because I know I'm going to get something on my suit. I'm going to spill food on my slacks, and go from there. So I'm there. We're in Glasgow. From Glasgow, I fly over in a torrential storm. Get to Ireland. I was glad to have made it across the water with the little puddle jumper we were on, going through the thunderstorm, and then get to London, and I get to sleep, and the phone rings in my hotel in the middle of the night. My phone must have died, my cell phone. So my phone in my room rings, and normally my wife, she must have looked at my itinerary, because when you travel that much, say, okay, honey, I'm staying at this hotel, I'll be here, there. After a while, it just becomes rote. So she knows she'd get a hold of me on my cell phone, but this particular time she couldn't. So she, the kids, and my mother-in-law were in Disney, and while I was away, and I get a call in the middle of the night, and she said, "Hon, my mom's sick." It turns out her mom had a gallbladder incident. She said, and I'm here with the kids, and they're really upset because grandma's not feeling well, and they really, really would like to see you. Can you come back? So I said, of course. So in the middle of the night, I make plans, and I'm going to fly to Orlando from London. And for whatever reason, flights were booked. It was a headache. But I get on the plane. I forget 10, 12 hours at a stopover. That part of the trip's a little foggy. So I get there, and I'm in Disney with a suit and shirts and tie, wrinkled shirts, right? So I have nothing. So what do? You do what you do when you're in Disney. We go to the gift store, and here I am walking around with a Daffy Duck or Mickey Mouse T-shirt and a Mickey Mouse baseball hat, and I buy a pair of shoes that were Disney shoes, and I've got Disney shorts on, and so here I am walking around as a walking billboard advertisement for 3 days, and I think it was 3 or 4 more days, and I owned it. At first, I said, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, not that I'm there with Disney with the kids. I love that, but I'm sitting here walking around like wearing the Disney outfit. So I did it. I owned it. We had a lot of fun. It was great. But after that, I had my fill of Disney. Now my wife and the kids love it, and they'll go back more with cousins and my mother-in-law. So my wife said to me about a month ago, she said, "Hey, by the way, one of our neighbors, we're going to take the kids to Disney over Memorial Day weekend, and I know you're busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on, but if you're okay with us going, it's going to be long. I know it's going to be very hard. It's going to be 5 days." I said, five days? She said, "Yeah, no, we're going to take the kids. Christina's going to take the kids, and we're just going to go, and you could stay home." So I said, "Oh my God, yes, honey, I'll be okay. I'll figure out what to do for 5 days." She said, "You sure? I feel terrible." I said, I know, but I'll weather through it. I'll tough it out. Now inside, I'm thinking. Now at the time, I didn't realize I'd finished Blacklist. I'm thinking Blacklist. I got the baseball. I got hockey playoffs. I got basketball playoffs. Free pass. A couple of days ago, sitting around the house, and my wife says, I feel horrible. I mean, I can't believe we're leaving you alone on Memorial Day. You've got 5 days. I mean, that's I would feel sick. And I'm sorry. Do you want me to book a flight? So I put on, my best acting skills, and I said, "Honey, listen, it's I know it's hard. I'm going to be by myself for 5 days, and I'll figure it out." And she said, "You sure you're not upset?" I said, "I'm not." So this week I will have 5 days to try and figure out what to do. I don't have to pick up my towel. I can leave my clothes laying around. I can eat whatever the heck I want, and I can watch sports all night. So that's my upcoming week. I am going to terribly miss my family for those 5 days, no doubt, but I will weather through, in case you're worried. So now let's turn to the rest of the week. Let's turn to the stock stuff. Tricky week last week. Stocks gave up about a quarter of the prior week's advance. The S&P was, and the NASDAQ and the Dow were down a little bit, half to like 0.7%. And what was in the news? What do you think was in the news? The usual China-U.S. trade negotiation. The saga continues. One day it looks like there's going to be trade wars. The next day, not so much. Who knows? But it's the who knows. It's the uncertainty that make investors nervous. Last week I had Steve Kumar on, and I got some great feedback on Steve, by the way. But we talked a lot about the relationship of fixed income, of bonds, and how to think about it and incorporate it into your equity thoughts. And last week, Treasury yields were in the spotlight after they spiked to multi-year highs on Tuesday. The 10-year benchmark, which is the 10-year Treasury, it's the benchmark, went as high as 3.1%, which is, for context, that's the highest level since July of 2011. It finished the week up just slightly under 3.1%. But, that rise in the risk-free rate, which is a 10-year Treasury, it's presumed to have no risk, it takes buyers away from the equity market. And it kind of put the Wall Street mini rally on hold. And again, last week I touched on that, the great earnings, fabulous earnings, right? Well, not so fabulous after all. And in terms of its impact there, the earnings were fabulous, the revenues were fabulous, but the impact on stocks wasn't so fabulous. After earnings season, the market was still down 5%. Earnings-wise, there were a few earnings last week that trickled in, mainly retailers. They dominated on that front. We saw Walmart, Home Depot, Nordstrom, JCPenney, Macy's. All 5 of them beat estimates, but Walmart, Home Depot, Nordstrom, and JCPenney fell short on same-store sales. That's the metric that most people focus on, and the stocks got hit hard. Macy's had a good number. They beat same-store sales. Stock went higher. But so of those 5, 4 of them struggled, right, with same-store sales. That's how are we doing? We sell more stuff for stores that have been around for a year. Did it meet expectations? No. How is that possible? The consumer's doing so well, right? It's all we hear. The consumer unemployment's at decades lows. Everything's fantastic. Or is it? You've heard me say before, I'm very suspicious of the so-called strong consumer. I mean, despite these unemployment levels, what we are seeing and what I look at, right, we're seeing signs in consumer credit land of weakness. You've heard me talk before about subprime auto loan defaults, right? They're above global financial crisis highs. Credit card numbers, not so hot. Student loan defaults, forget about it. They continue unabated. Gas prices are going up. I notice it at the tank, at the station when I'm filling up. So, we careful what you read in the headlines, right? And I'm not going to go. This isn't a discussion about the consumer or the macro. You can go back and listen to prior podcasts. But despite fantastic earnings, we saw a good proxy for what the consumer looks like this week, and it wasn't so hot this past week, and it wasn't so hot. So after last week, the S&P is up about 1.5% for the year, and the Dow is now flat. NASDAQ's up 6.5%, but that's the tech-heavy NASDAQ, right? As you've heard me talk about that before. So I leave you with the same message on that, which is stay cautious, right? If you have a lot of riskier assets in a portfolio, you might want time to re-examine those. If you have some really big gains on some stocks, right? I know people hate to sell because they don't want to pay taxes or they fall in love with the stock. As Steve and I spoke about last week, ask yourself every day, would I buy this stock today? Is it an attractive risk reward? Because if it's not, it might not deserve a spot in your portfolio or deserve a smaller spot in your portfolio. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. The goal I set out when I started this podcast was to help educate listeners so that they have more tools in their investing toolbox. And I do this for ordinary investors, retail investors, not for institutionals. I do have I get institutional emails, so I know people are listening. But I'm doing this to help educate people, and I want to share insights and experience I have from 20 plus years as a hedge fund investor. I was a professional investor. I am a professional investor for a long time, and with the podcast, I like to talk about the things that go in to help shape my views on the markets, the industries, the sectors, and the companies. I typically start the podcast out with that, and then I try and bring on some interesting guests and have conversations about myriad topics, that I'm hoping add value. And I don't have scripted questions. I don't ask a question, they give me an answer, and then I go on to the next question. I want the conversation to flow. I want it to be like you're listening to two guys sitting in a bar over a beer. It could go wherever. What I might have intended to ask them when the conversation started might not happen because they said something interesting, and we're going to run with that. And that's a benefit you get from listening to these really sharp people. And the benefit of me having a fairly broad base of knowledge on different things in the equity markets, the fixed income markets, the commodity markets, been around, seen travel. So we're going to let you be sitting listening to us, sharing a beer with us. When it comes to discussing stuff, the only time you'll hear me discussing hot stocks or sectors is when I think there should be a warning flag hoisted up the flagpole. There's enough of that in the mainstream financial media. My God, you could read most newsletters who are in the business to sell subscriptions. And what sells subscriptions to ordinary investors, unfortunately, is what's hot and what's in the mainstream and what's working. So while they're out trumpeting alternative research, they're selling newsletters. And what sells newsletters is what's working. So, I'm trying to bring a different perspective to it than that. So I'm trying to open up your investing mind to ideas that are out of the ordinary, stuff that's not being discussed when you turn on TV or put on the radio in the car. My 15th podcast. And prior to 15 episodes ago, I'd never hosted a podcast. I'd never spoken publicly, really. I shouldn't say that. A year ago, I started talking about uranium publicly. But prior to that, my career most of the time on Wall Street is as a short seller. Short sellers like to keep it a low profile. I mean, I invest a lot on the long side, but you see on TV, you see some of the huge name hedge fund guys, the titans of the industry. And that's relatively new the last several years. For a long time, hedge fund guys were very reluctant to go on because the law said you couldn't advertise your fund. So why be interviewed if it could be construed as an advertisement? So people have shied away from that. Those laws have relaxed. So you see some of the bigger guys go on, but I've had no media experience at all. But now I'm, after doing this, after, almost 4 months, I'm starting to get an understanding of who my listeners are. I get some terrific emails from folks all over the map, all over the world, and fascinating professional backgrounds. A lot of executives, a lot of retired executives, a lot of business owners who send me really, really thoughtful emails. And we go back and forth, and they have questions. Now, I can't answer individual questions about individual stocks. I legally can't do that. I'm not a registered investment advisor. And I have a newsletter, so when a subscriber writes me, I can't answer individually. I could talk in generalities, but I can't give them any advice whatsoever. But what I do see is really smart people, really with an insatiable appetite to learn. And that's a common thread I see in these emails. And it's really a desire for more than just investment ideas, but they want to learn how to find them, how to process them, how to research them. So that gave me an idea for the podcast, which as this podcast evolves, I'm going to have new ideas and new thoughts and maybe new segments. And I'm going to introduce a new segment today. And it's a segment that's going to educate you about what a hedge fund analyst or portfolio manager does. And my goal is to put you in this seat, in my seat, and each week discuss the different aspects of analysis, portfolio management, field research, the stuff we do every day, but give you like a behind the scenes look at how a professional investor goes about his business. And I have no idea. I have zero ability to come up with creative marketing ideas. So I'm going to introduce what's called the Hedge Fund Corner segment of the podcast. Shoot me an email if you have a better idea. No pride in authorship on that. I could not care less. So about 15 minutes before I started recording this, I thought, oh, geez, I need a name. So we'll call it the Hedge Fund Corner, but that could change. And there's no particular order, by the way, in which I'm going to do this. So I'm going to start with, this is how you find a stock to own or short. There's no secret sauce for that, right? It's not going to be, this is it, because there is no secret sauce, right? For me, idea generation starts with being a voracious reader about various subjects. And a lot have nothing to do with investing. It's a lot of current events, geopolitics. I read a ton of history, just a lot of stuff. And I've been doing that for 3 decades. So I don't know how to say, okay, here's the thing. It's just, you have a foundation and you build off of things. But during the podcast, I can introduce you into what I'm looking at, but it's hard to pinpoint what exactly sparks an idea. To say that I run things through screens and this screen, here's the magic number. It doesn't work that way. I have a, if you would say, system. I have, there's a number of items that I look at, a number of things financially that I look at when something piques my curiosity. And it's kind of a smell test set of numbers that I look through. And over time, I'll get into some of that stuff. But there's no secret sauce, right? So keep listening to the podcast. You'll know what's interesting to me, and just we'll talk about some stuff that I think it make for interesting ideas. But today, what I want to talk about is a very, very important part of the research process. And I think it often gets overlooked, but it's critical. And it's what some people call boots on the ground research. I grew up in the industry calling it primary research, right? And that's the qualitative stuff. That's the peeling the onion back. It's doing a deep dive on a company, right? So I get an idea, right? We just talked about it. I don't know where the idea comes from, but I got an idea. So what do I do, right? Now for me, I've looked at pretty much every industry that you could think of over a long career. So I kind of have a mental playbook of what to look for in each industry and a series of questions that I know I'm going to ask. And it's like what you do for a living, right? After you've been doing it for a while, it kind of becomes rote and you know what to do. And you've got this innate sense of what works and what doesn't. So it's no different that's what I do, right? So it's, let's say I'm an individual investor and I'm intent on managing my own portfolio, and I want to figure out how do I get an edge? How do I know that this investment makes sense, right? So here are some of the things I do still, even though I might know an industry, a company. I visit the website for, typically the first thing I'll do is look at a company presentation. Now I look at that company presentation in the investor section. I'm fully aware that the company tells me in that presentation everything it wants me to know. What they don't put in there is what they don't want me to know, right? So I always be skeptical. But I use that for a starting point. But for me, I like to go to the 10K, the annual report. That's in the investor section also. Now for me, if you follow me on Twitter, you know my handle is footnotes first, right? So for me, I like to read the footnotes first. That's kind of like reading a book backwards. I read the ending first. And I'll go into this in future podcasts because that's where all the hidden treasure is in the footnotes. But it's going to take some time to work into what you want to look for in there. But we're going to get to that, but not today. But to familiarize yourself with the company, what you do is you read the business description and the management discussion and analysis segment of it. And it lays it out, some more than others. And over time, and as we start to talk more throughout this Hedge Fund Corner series, you're going to realize you can kind of tell when companies are hiding something or they're not being full disclosure in some of these things, but we'll get to that. But that's what you want to do. Read the business description. What do they do? How do they do it? Who do they compete against? What's the market like? What's the industry conditions like? And then management discussion and analysis. That's going to kind of tell you, how did our sales do? What's going on in our, did we sell more in units? Did we get more sales from pricing? Was pricing weak? Was competition taking away from our sales? Right? They'll give you some flavor there. What's going into our cost of goods sold? What are the issues at hand there? What's happening in our selling general administrative expenses, right? You don't need an MBA for that. You don't need to be a CFA for that. It's basic reading. So from there, if I'm intrigued, right, what do I do? So I found a company I like. It's kind of interesting. I like the story. Be careful of stories, but I like the story. I don't know, the numbers might kind of make sense. And again, we're getting into all that. So what the company tells a good story. How do I know if it's true? And what do I know if if the expectations are right. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road for investors, and this is where you see hedge funds do well. Now, I'm going to go on a quite a 30-second tangent here because I'm sick and tired of people saying, "Oh, hedge funds suck, underperforming the last decade." Okay, let me tell you about hedge funds. Hedge funds are not 100% exposed to the market, and those who invest in hedge funds know that. Right? They're long, being if I owned nothing but stocks, no cash, I'd be 100% long. But if I had shorts in that portfolio or cash as a portion of it, I would have net exposure to the market. So if I'm 100% long with stocks and I'm 50% short, I'm 50% net long. So I'm not exposed to the market. So when you're not that fully exposed to the market, you're not going to likely outperform the market. Now, since I started in the hedge fund industry, I can't even tell you how much it's grown. It's multiples and multiples and multiples of assets by really smart capital allocators who know that there are periods of time where hedge funds don't outperform the market. Now, people forget because the last several years it's been la-la land with all of the easy money being thrown at it and passive investing and everything else. I remember sitting in the hedge fund when the global financial crisis had. There were a lot of people when the S&P was down 38, 39%, who damn well wish they were in a hedge fund that were outperforming dramatically. So, but when you're shorting stocks as a hedge fund, and I'll go further on future podcasts about those who complain, oh, they're 2 and 20, and it's not 2 and 20. It's 1 1/4, 1.5, and 17 or 15, and how bad hedge funds are, and you see it in the mainstream press. I'm going to explain to you why they're not. But that aside, here's what a hedge fund analyst does. And it is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's primary research. This is what I want to focus on today. Because what you're reading, right, if you're lucky enough, I say that lucky with quotes, to read Wall Street research, right, from one of the investment banks, well, for the most part, they may as well be the marketing firms for the companies. Not all, but a lot of them, right? They get paid fees to do investment banking for them. So it's not wise for the analyst to come out with negative reports, even though the analyst has to be independent. There's what's called in the industry, a Chinese wall, right? It separates at the Great Wall of China. Good luck with that. For smaller companies, you have newsletters. Good luck with that. Not all, but many. They're storytellers first who happen to wrap a recommendation around a good story, right? So if you want to know if an idea has investment merits, you have to do field work, right? It's good old-fashioned detective Columbo work. And most investors don't do this, right? So most professional investors, if you run a reasonable amount of assets, you have access to company management teams. Now, those investors can't be told anything that is not told to all investors because of something called Regulation FD, full disclosure. There are laws against that. Right. But the access that you get to management teams, you see them, right? They're people. So people talking to people, you get to meet them. You get to know about them, what's going on. You get to see their good days and bad days, right? And at that level, the CEOs, CFOs of big companies, they're brilliant. They're politicians. They're all good salesmen, right? So and most mutual fund managers and sell-side analysts who have great access to management teams, the analysts most of them are very smart. But they take the information they learn from these management teams and they build really fancy Excel spreadsheets to glean these insights and then forecast the future. It's access that individual investors don't have, right? So they're using their own public information about the company, their own sense or feel or gut. They go to a conference, they meet management teams in meetings, they go visit them at their corporate headquarters. All of that access provides comfort, right? And then they live in their own little world, right? So they're building their models, building their spreadsheets. I talked to Bob, I understand the business, seems like a good guy. There you go. Okay. I cannot stress enough. I cannot emphasize enough that management teams are either too optimistic or don't see changes occurring. And if they do see the changes, it's not until it's too late, or they're not going to cop to it until it's too late. So how do you get a leg up on that? Field work. What is that? It's going away from Wall Street. It's away from management teams, away from the crowd. It is the single best form of research you can do. It's qualitative. It's eyes and ears and picking up the phone. Everyone here listening is probably on LinkedIn or you've heard of it. You want to think about an industry. I can tell you a story. 2000, I forget, 5, 6, 7. I'm looking at a company called Armour Holdings. And I had known the company for a handful of years. And the company was a bulletproof vest maker when I started looking at it in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was run by a really smart guy named Warren Kanders. And he had put together this company in law enforcement protection and stuff like that. And then the war, and then the war came, and then he started to get into the up-armored Humvee business and SAPI plates, the plates the soldiers wear to protect them, the bulletproof, but made out of real high-strength stuff. and there were analysts covering the company on Wall Street, but you could see there was this drumbeat of war going on, and as the war kept going on, there were more orders coming in. But so, what can you do as an investor? You can sit there and wait to read a press release from the company that says, we just won this contract. And then you say, oh, God, they just won a contract. Let me go buy some stock. Okay, great. You and everyone else is going out and reacting to that good news. How could you have anticipated that good news? Well, here's what I did. There were little Army shows around the country, Army outposts where where orders were. There would be random shows throughout the country where all the vendors to the military would go and show their wares, and you'd have a bunch of the Army purchasing guys walking around. I would go to those shows, and I didn't see many Wall Street people at all. And I would walk around and I would talk to people. What do you like? What are you looking at? What's funding looking like? Right? To the buyers of this stuff. What's going on from a competitive standpoint? What's going to make a difference in what you decide to buy? What triggers a buying decision? Okay, that's a starting point. And then these are government contracts. Because they're government contracts, everything's public. But you go to the military website, you go to Department of Defense, you go to all the random websites for all these purchasing agencies within the government arm. It takes forever. But if you're sitting there and you're patient, you could pull out the bids, you could pull out the contracts, you could pull out the requests for proposals, you could pull out what the specifications are. We had boxes of them, me and my team. We would pour through them. And we started to put this mosaic together. We travel around the country, go to talk to these different participants at these shows, talk to the people who would say, well, this is the kind of stuff we're looking for, this is what we like. We knew what RFPs, because they were coming out, they were publicly listed. We were able to sense what size, what capacity the company had. Were they in a good position to bid for this? If they bid and if they won, who are they bidding against? What are the chances of winning? What are the probabilities? If they do, what's it mean to earnings? I was at a presentation that one of the senior members of the management team was speaking at. And he said, I was sitting in a couple rows back, and I had met him a handful of times, but he must have seen me at all these different shows. And he said, I could give the presentation, but there's probably somebody here who knows it better than the company better than me, because everywhere I turn around, I see him. And he pointed to me. And that's primary research. And we made many multiples of our investment. The stock got taken out eventually by one of the big defense contractors. But that's primary research. That's field work. That's away from the crowd, away from the noise. It's having, and it enabled me and my team to have conviction that I don't care what the headlines say. I don't care what the sell side says, because I don't see these guys at these events. I know what the work we're doing, and we can do fourth grade math, and we could read, and we could talk to people. And that's what it is. Now, I don't expect you to do that level of detail, but that's a start. You want to talk to customers. You want to talk to suppliers. You want to talk to vendors. You want to talk to the competition. You want to talk to, if you could find them, former employees. That's how you get an edge. So for the interview segment today, I'm going to bring somebody on that is in that chain of primary research. And he's got a new product that I came across recently. A friend of mine is on the board of directors, and he said, you should look at this thing. It's kind of interesting. And I did, and I thought, wow, this is a pretty cool tool that could help me in my investment research process. I do a lot of work on a particular auto parts supplier, and I travel around and I see stuff, and I take pictures of stuff, and I thought, wow, I could use this. So from a primary research perspective, I'm going to bring on somebody who I think is really fascinating, and you can kind of see what I'm looking at when it comes to the primary research process. So we're going to bring on Craig Stack, who's the founder of a company called TruePick. Craig Stack, welcome to the podcast.
Mike, thanks so much for having me.
So you and I met recently, and it was a great introduction by a mutual friend of ours and one of your board members. So tell us about. So you run a company. You founded a company called TruePick, and I was telling listeners right before in the introduction how I saw this and I thought, wow, this can really help from a primary research standpoint. So why don't you tell listeners what TruePick is, and then we'll go into your background and how TruePick came into being. But tell us what TruePick is.
Sure. So think of TruePick as a digital notary for photos and for images and videos, for that matter. And so what we've done is we've created camera technology where we can 100% authenticate the fact that the video or the image is accurate and has never been manipulated or photoshopped or edited whatsoever. But we also capture all of the metadata with that image. So think date, time, and location. And we can 100% verify that that is also accurate and authentic. So in a world today where basically you've got fake news, you've got edited images, we're really seeing is no longer believing. We're bringing authenticity and truth back to the internet.
So that's interesting. So tell us, well, before we get into your background, that's interesting because you told me something when we were speaking the other day that I didn't realize, that you can manipulate iPhone data. So I could take a picture because I thought when it was first introduced to me, I said, I can take a picture on my phone. And then when you and I were talking, I said, hey, Craig, as I'm using this, I could see it really helps me because one of the things that organization is not my greatest strength. And I said, so I take a picture and I might have it, or somebody emails me a picture, and I get a lot of that from the podcast. People email me pictures on certain things they're seeing. And now I get 500 emails a day, and I don't exactly remember that. I remember the picture, the email, but then 5 days later when I want to reference it, I go back. I'm like, shoot, where is it? And you and I were talking about how I could use it. And then you said something to me is, well, Mike, the iPhone data, you can manipulate and change those pictures. So talk about that, because I don't think I wasn't aware of it, and I don't know that my listeners would be aware of it.
Yeah, most people wouldn't be. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. There's about 2,100 apps right now that lets you manipulate either the image or the metadata associated with the image. One app in particular, it's free. It's for the Android phone. It's been downloaded over 30 million times, and it lets you spoof the location of your device and subsequently the image that you're taking on that device. So you kind of have to wonder why 30 million plus people felt the need to download that app to change the geolocation of their phone. So it's really a crazy world right now. Most people, I'm sure your listeners fall into this bucket, would never think of spoofing, an image or whatnot. But sadly, there's a lot of people out there committing, fraud and whatnot that really take advantage of these apps. With the iPhone in particular, you can literally go into your settings, change your date and time, and you'll see yourself. You snap photos, they'll go back into your photo roll and land at a previous date. So it's a really simplistic thing to do. A lot of these apps are free, and there's a lot of people doing bad things on everything from fake profiles on Airbnb and VRBO, fake listings on eBay and Craigslist, fake dating profiles. I mean, you name it, and there's savvy people out there, taking advantage of it.
Could you tell if somebody were doing if they were visiting, if an investor said they were visiting something and they took a photo, but they didn't really go there, and they took a photo from the internet, and they said that we were here, we were visiting this place, and they put another image up in a document. Could you tell if that's real or not?
It's a great question. One of the first things that we noticed is that was a very, very popular way to commit fraud on the internet. There's about 1.8 billion images uploaded to the internet every day, right? So if you go to Google Images, you can type in anything and it will pop up. And so what we saw was that users would they would Google image search whatever they wanted, a cracked windshield, a red dented Honda Civic, it didn't matter. And they would take their smartphone and they would zoom in and snap a photograph of that image. And because the resolution is so high on these computer screens nowadays, it's virtually impossible to tell that that's a fake image. So one of the tests that we do at TruePick, and I can get into them, we do about 21 tests, but one of them is we can detect if you're taking a photograph of a photograph or a picture of a picture. And, we don't really get into the details of a lot of our tests because a lot of them are proprietary and we've got patents on a few of them. But in effect, from a high level, we're looking at 2D versus 3D imagery. But it's an amazing way to quickly root out a very prevalent way of committing fraud.
Wow. So what was the genesis of the idea? What got you started in this?
My background is actually in finance. I worked for a large bank as an equity trader for a number of years, and then I got into the insurance and life settlement world. And it was really, I kind of had this epiphany. It was back in late 2014, where I had several friends complaining to me around the same time from different use cases. One was trying to sell something online and was getting questioned day in and day out. Is this really you? Do you really have this item? I had another friend that was single, was on a was on a dating website and was having a lot of problems there. And it kind of hit me that, seeing is no longer believing, that you cannot trust, your eyes anymore, sadly. And that what the world needs is a way to know that when you see a specific, photo or video that's tagged with, in this case, our watermark, you 100% know that you can trust that image or video. And, it's timing's everything. It's really amazing. This was candidly before all the surge in the fake news and whatnot, but this problem has only gotten worse, since we launched the company about 3.5 years ago. And sadly, it's probably only going to get worse with, all of the introduction of, the new editing tools. And I don't know if you've seen some of the latest stuff where they can literally, take someone's video and change the words coming out of their mouth. I mean, it's downright scary when you stop to think about the repercussions that could happen from it.
So it's fascinating because not only we talk about your product, I think it's good from a listener standpoint to they get to see and we could talk about what a startup does and how a startup goes about it. So there's the different facet because some of the listeners also they like to when if the time ever came where your company went public, there are thousands of other companies that go through this process and then they eventually come public and people forget where they came from. So how does that work? Help educate listeners as to how a company goes from startup concept to startup to raising capital and all that stuff.
Sure. A lot of it was a lot of hustle and a lot of it was a lot of luck. I had the idea. I could not get the idea out of my head. Literally started by going through, what names did I really like and what domain names were available that I wanted the name to really speak out. So when you heard TruePick, you knew instantaneously what it was. This is a domain that was, sadly was for sale, so I had to pay up and buy it. But I knew by doing that, I would kind of force my hand into taking this idea and really doing something with it. So call it the first year and a half. I really just went after it myself, and without having a tech background, there was a lot of trial and error, but I was very, very lucky. The first engineer that I hired to build version 1 is still with us, today, and I stumbled into hiring an incredible engineer. And so we also realized that we had the ability to go out there and get some patents on this tech, that there was what we were doing and the way we were going about getting it done had not been patented. So we hired a great law firm that secured several patents, and we've got several more pending. Not cheap, but definitely necessary as far as kind of building a moat and a wall around your product. Did everything from the trademarking, all that stuff. Really, like I said, it was not my forte. I used to work at a big bank, and I'd never really done this before, but I was passionate about it. So after about a year and a half, I realized that I had taken the ball pretty much as far down the field as I was equipped to carry it. And I needed to find someone that had previously been a tech CEO that had built a business, exited the business. This is not their first rodeo, and they could run with it. And so I was kind of a quandary because I didn't want to really put the idea out there I was kind of trying to keep it really hush-hush because I thought it was such a big idea, and I was shocked that no one had done anything like this. So I was trying to kind of keep it on the down low. At the same token, go out there and try to find, a tech CEO to step in and run this. And once again, luck stepped in, and a good friend of a good friend had just built a business, had 30 some odd employees, had exited it, and was on the road looking for his next gig. And we hit it off. He's an incredibly talented guy. He's our current CEO, Jeff McGregor. We hit it off, and I said, Jeff, come run this. And so he moved up to San Diego, and we went off to the races. We were just closing a seed round at that time. We raised just under $2 million, which is all friends and family money, and then we just closed. We're in the process of closing our Series A, which we're doing a press release in about 2 or 3 weeks. So it's exciting stuff. We're now up to about 17 employees. And we got a lot of exciting stuff ahead of us that we're pumped about.
Well, it's interesting. So for me, when I as a research tool, so I could take a photo and it's going to tell me on the photo the date, the time that can't be altered, right? And it tells me, it says who it's for. So it says my email address or my user and password and all of that stuff. So now in my case, I have a newsletter, and I also have a uranium fund. So when I'm out, if I'm visiting a uranium mine or if I'm visiting a car lot looking at used cars, and I want to use that as a point of reference, I take that photo, and it memorializes that I was there. And so so it does a couple of things. It memorializes I was there. So if I want to share that with someone, I know that what I'm sharing, they know it's kind of authenticated that I was there, right? Because you can't go in and manipulate that like you could on an iPhone,
Correct.
as you were telling me, and that to me was really interesting. But also, if I'm looking at others that might have said I was there, you don't know, because people can take images and use it. So this is nice. I like the fact that it does that, but it also helps me organize it. So I know that I have. It's not just it's not a with all my other photos of my family and everything else. This is, I could specifically set up for what I want by file and everything else. So I found that very useful. Well, when you and I were talking, though, what really hit me is from this is how you find technologies, by talking to people. But you and I were talking, and I know from having friends in the insurance business, having a relative that's in the claims business, how much fraud occurs in the insurance industry. And, now for the big mutuals where you can invest in, well, we know fraud exists, but fraud hurts all of us because our rates go up all the time. And you were telling me some of the use cases for this that I thought was fascinating. So give some examples. And I say this for listeners because while they may not be running an insurance company or some of these other verticals that this can be applied to, technologies like this can come along where it can be a game changer for certain industries. And by following stuff like this, like a TruePick or other businesses that from the ground up can affect change in an industry, it can ultimately make an investment much more appealing because there could be massive cost savings. So talk about, Craig, if you would, what the use cases for this are.
Sure. So to take a step back, so just to give your listeners a high level of how the tech works. Right now, we've got the TruePick app. It's in the App Store. You can download it for free. And what happens is when you push the shutter button in our app, the millisecond you push that shutter button, we're capturing that photograph. And we're capturing it up in our server in the cloud. And we're also capturing all of the metadata associated with that photograph. Now, as I said earlier, we can't trust your device because individuals can compromise their device one of 1,000 different ways. So we capture all of that metadata from our server, right? And then we run that photograph through a series of about 20 plus tests. It takes right now about 11 seconds, right? And as I said before, we're checking everything from, is it a picture-to-picture? Have you jailbroken your phone? Are you trying to spoof your location or the date or time? And a bunch of other tests that are proprietary. Assuming that you are a good actor, we then imprint on that image our TruePick watermark on the lower left, and the lower right would be your username, the date, and the time, and if you want the location. The user has the ability to take that image. They can share it via email, via text, post directly to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatnot. So it lives like an image, just like any other image in your phone. So what we realized was the use cases for technology like this, they run so far and wide. And Mike, it's funny when you and I were talking, we never thought about using this, to aggregate data from around the country, which was yet another use case.
Yep.
So what we're
I mean, it's funny. That's one, folks, listeners. When Craig and I first spoke, I saw a use case for it from a research perspective, and I thought, wow, this is really good, right? So it's funny how you start talking and you come up with different things. Yep.
And it's funny, Mike, because we've spent a lot of time, and we've probably got about 65 different use cases. Some of them are incredibly obvious, and some of them are very niche, but you still stumbled into new ones. Excuse me.
Yep.
So from a consumer angle, what we're seeing people, and we see these TruePicks posted everywhere from literally dating sites to used car websites, insurance, as you said. That's an enterprise that we're doing a lot of work with a lot of big players there. Right now, there's about $32 billion of fraud annually in the property casualty side in insurance, which is just a staggering number. A lot of the big insurance companies are trying to move to the self-serve claims, system where basically they're trying to avoid sending a third-party adjuster out to review the damage on your car or maybe the damage on your house. Now, what happens, sadly, is you'll see a lot of people that take advantage of this. They know that they can snap a photograph, send it into their insurance carrier, and if it's a low-value item or whatnot, or low-value damage, the insurance carrier will just cut them a check and they'll be on their way. And so, use case I mentioned before, people are literally taking photographs of cracked windshields. They Google it, they find one on the internet, they send it to the insurance carrier, and the insurance carrier cuts them a check for $1,000, and no one's the wiser. So, what we can offer the insurance carriers, we can drop our technology. If they have an app that's existing, we can drop it into that app and take over that camera technology and thus serve them an authentic photograph that they know is real, and they can therefore pay that claim and feel good about it. Or we can launch an app for them if they don't have one and they want one. And so we're giving them the ability to still, not have to go through the cost of sending a third-party adjuster out there, but, sleep at night because they've got this authentic, image or video that they can subsequently pay the claim off of. So, from an enterprise standpoint, there's a lot of industries we're going to be going after, but insurance is the one that far and away, when they heard about this, gravitated to it and are really embracing it.
No, that's really interesting. So how do you, you've got this growing company, you've got all these use cases. How do you prioritize and how do you think about where you go next?
That's a great question. And it's one that, internally we definitely, kicked around because there are so many different use cases that we can really help out. And we see this on a daily basis. Insurance really was one because of the dollar amount. And because that they really understand that this is a problem that they have today, and it's really only getting worse. There's a lot of insurtech companies out there. We're all so spoiled with the Amazon Prime and the Uber, where you push a button and you get whatever you want within 5 minutes to an hour. And insurance is really an industry that historically moves pretty slowly, and people are not happy with hey, I'm in a car accident, I got to wait 2 weeks to get an adjuster, or I got to drive 25 miles to this body shop, so they're trying to walk this fine line between making it more, seamless with today's customer, tomorrow's customer for that matter, who's used to, having everything at their fingertips, but yet avoid, the fraud that is inherent, sadly, with that industry. So we really feel that we offer them an elegant solution to accomplish both, to make it super seamless for, the user. We're all on our phones all day long. We all snap photos all day long. It's a behavior that no one needs to be taught. And, to offer that to the client, and thus, subsequently pay that claim quicker, it's just a win-win. So for right now, that's the industry that we're really focused on. And, once we get even more traction there, there's several other that we're going to kind of move into, one by one.
Well, it's interesting. You said earlier how easy it is, 1.8 billion uploads. When you told me that the other day, I wouldn't even know how to quantify what the number was. But when you told me, I don't know why, I thought, oh my God, that's a lot. But you think about that, and this is right. The picture's worth 1,000 words, or is it? So right. And I think about that. So for my listeners who are investors, and I'm teaching them how to do primary research, fieldwork, and I saw a way to incorporate this for myself. But it really made me think is there are so many things out there that we see that people try and pictorialize. And it really does make us have to stop and think, because while we can be drawn into the photos and the pictures and that make us feel like we're there, it should make us question whether or not we really are there, what we're really seeing is accurate. Because I was not aware of the manipulation that could occur, and especially like when you mentioned an iPhone thing, that just shocked me. So that's pretty cool. So what are the biggest challenges you face as a startup? What is it every day you go in and go, holy crap, I can't believe I got to deal with this again?
It's a constantly
everything.
Shifting, I was going to say it's a constantly shifting landscape, and it almost feels like you're standing on a quicksand. But we've been really lucky. We've got a team of passionate people that recognize what an issue this is. Sadly, a lot of times these photos get, these fake photos get tweeted around, or fake photos associated with fake news stories, and a lot of people are quick to react, and it's a lot harder to put that genie back in the bottle. It's often days or even weeks later before people say, whoa, that wasn't a real photo. That was a photo that was misassociated with the news report that went along with it. And by then, a lot of people have already reacted. They've already, retweeted it or commented on it or whatnot. And so we think that there's a really big angle from just consumer behavior as well. We've got right now, I think you'll find interesting, we're working with a lot of NGOs documenting, conditions on the ground around the world.
Can you explain listeners an AGO?
Yeah, so we're working with charities,
Yep.
and organizations literally around the country that deliver aid in some of the toughest spots that one can imagine. And as you can, you think about it, you really don't know if that particular aid is getting, to the place it's supposed to get to, and by the certain date that it's supposed to be delivered by. So, candidly, what we're able to do is, let these people take the TruePick and document that particular good, arrived and that these particular people have it, right? As opposed to just, taking their word for it. And so, we're working day and night with these organizations because we feel that tech can be used to really, better the lives of a lot of people, around the world.
One of the things I've been thinking about as I look for applications for the app from a research perspective is there a way, or are you guys working on something that could tell me because until you get mass adoption, not everyone's going to have TruePick. But is there a way for somebody to take a picture of a picture and know whether or not that was an authentic photo?
Right now there's no way to do that with 100% accuracy. The tools that are out there are so sophisticated that you can never tell that it's 100% accurate. One of the reasons that we can is because we're controlling the capture of that image.
Right. Yeah.
So the millisecond you push that, and I'm controlling the environment that you're capturing that image in. If I were just to show you a photograph, there's definitely tools and whatnot, and we've got a lot of them where we could analyze the photograph and maybe score it, call it, where we could say, all right, like we think there's an 85% probability this photograph is real or not, or been manipulated, right? But right now, as we speak, there's no way to 100% know that another photograph is authentic unless you control the environment of the capture, which is what we do. So to your point, this isn't something that someone's going to use every day. If, you're snapping photographs of your kids playing Little League or
right.
Your breakfast and you want to throw it up on Instagram and show your friends. That's not really, what a TruePick is designed for. That being said, when you think about, validating, pretty much anytime you're thinking about images and commerce, right? From, let's say a rental car. The classic example is, you pick it up. Right now, the guy at Enterprise walks around with a clipboard and a piece of paper and makes some chicken scratch marks if there's a ding or a dent, right? Mm-hmm. And often that suffices and often it doesn't. Often there's a lot of he said, she said. You can imagine if the same scenario, you literally just hit record and you walk around taking a TruePick video of the car and you zoom in when there's any dings or dents. And that's it. It's done in about, 5 to 25 seconds, depending upon how thorough you want to be. We're capturing that. We're authenticating the exact day, date, time, minute, so a week later you return that car, there's no ambiguity. And that goes for home rentals, right? You think about the whole issue with, security deposits on Airbnb and VRBO, right?
Yeah.
Simple way for, once again, to prevent any sort of he said, she said, right?
And it takes the ambiguity out because there's no manipulating the data on it.
Exactly. And then you think about all the stuff you're potentially buying from eBay Motors, eBay itself, to Craigslist, right? You got people out there posting things that they don't even own, right? It could be tickets to a game. It could be, you name it. And a simple way is to just request a TruePick. Hey, Mike, you're saying you got 2 tickets to a baseball game tonight. No problem. Send me a TruePick. So I know that right now they're in your possession, right?
Yep.
Because anybody can get any image of any item and literally throw it up there. One of the stats that we came across that we were shocked by was a pervasive fraud on the dating sites. And the FBI said that they had about $130 million of fraud that was reported to them. And they think that's less than 10% because people that go through this sort of fraud are typically too embarrassed to report it.
Yeah. What occurs? What kind of fraud occurs?
So it's crazy. A lot of it is the classic, it's all fake profiles, and you engage with the person and you've never met them, obviously. But they chat them up for days or weeks, and then they do the classic, I'd love to come visit you. I can't afford a plane ticket. Can you send me $500? Or I'm on the road. I just got my passport stolen. I don't know what I'm going to do. Can you wire me $1,000? And you'd be shocked at who falls for this, right?
Wow.
To the tune of, they're estimating over $1.3 billion a year of fraud on just the dating sites alone. Now, once again, we have a seamless way to really stop this overnight. I mean, if you're communicating with somebody and your spidey senses go up for a second, I simply just say, you know what, Mike, download this free app and just snap a picture and send it to me, right? And if that photograph, doesn't come back, matching the same photos I'm looking at and or from the same town, right? The person just won't send the photograph and they hem and they haw, something's up, right? Yep. So it's a really seamless way. And we think eventually there'll be, our tech will be used to basically have authentic or validated or verified user profiles, for that matter, whether it's on dating sites or other, sharing economy sites, because there's just so much fraud out there, and it's such a
it's staggering. You and I were talking when we spoke last time. We were saying, I was telling you, I think, the story of my uncle, because and this opened my eyes to senior fraud. My uncle, 76 years old, in good, not in good health. He's got cancer, but his faculties are there. And about a year and a half ago or so, he told me over lunch that he had been defrauded out of $10,000 by who he thought was a family friend. The son of a family friend called him up and said that he was in Costa Rica in a prison, and he was being falsely accused of something. Could my uncle wire him $2,500? And he said, okay. And he wired him, and then he did another 25, and it was 4 times of $2,500. And this is a fairly astute man with all his faculties, and he was defrauded out of $10,000. So I started to do a little research, and I saw that fraud against seniors is a $36 billion a year industry. It's not even a cottage industry; it's a monster industry. So
Wow.
when you just mentioned the dating stuff, you say, "Wow, it really is," and that actually got us. I have developers working on software to address that issue because it's pervasive. So yeah, fraud's pretty rampant.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's a sad story, and I wish it was rare, but you read about them day in and day out. The senior industry, as you said, sadly they get taken advantage of quite often. One of the things another use case that we've seen with TruePick, and we hope it's going to be able to help the senior space. People are using TruePick as a virtual digital time card, right? Because we can control, the capture that photograph and all the metadata. If you've got people that are out in the field or doing whatever, you can simply have them take a TruePick, either of the task that they're supposed to do or even a selfie, right? So we've got a construction company in Kazakhstan, of all places. Every morning, the foreman has about 120 odd construction workers take a TruePick selfie when they show up at the work site and then again when they leave. So we can document, that they're actually, doing the 8-hour day. So, one of the use cases we've talked about is how we can use this in the senior space to make sure they're not being taken advantage of, right? And it could be as simple as, you've got a mom or dad that's a couple states over and you're paying for someone to go there, a few times a week for X hours a day, and you want to make sure the person's showing up on time, that they may be doing certain tasks and they're leaving at a certain hour. Once again, require a TruePick when they show up, when they leave, and, of whatever task they may do. The beauty of this tech is everybody's got a smartphone on them, and most of us sadly have them all day long. So there's no ability to kind of weasel out of fulfilling that request. So
that's fabulous. Especially, I mean, there are, as I was doing my research into the senior market, there's 7 million long distance adult children who care for their parents, one or the other, or both. And they live across the country from one another. And you think about that, if they don't require full-time care, they may have somebody coming in and seeing them 2 or 3 hours a day. But one of the things we learned is that the seniors, if they are not getting the care they want, they come from the silent generation where they were raised not to say anything, and they suck it up, and they don't want to bother their adult children because they know they have lives. So a lot of times the care is not being delivered, or they're being mistreated, and something like what you're mentioning there would really be valuable because you could document with photos. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's great. So Craig, I enjoy talking. Anything that I haven't touched on that you think is interesting that you want to mention?
I mean, we've covered a bunch. I just invite your users. The app, like I said, it's free. It's True, TruePick, and please download it, snap away, and we're constantly adding new bells and whistles. So as time goes on, it's going to go from great to even better. And yeah, we really look forward to bringing truth and authenticity back to the internet and to images. We live in an unfortunate time right now.
From a privacy standpoint, if somebody's using it and they've, how do you protect their privacy?
Yeah, so you're going to create your username and password and whatnot. We've obviously got a privacy policy, just like every other company out there. But your TruePicks, you're in control of them, right? So if you want to keep them private, you keep them private. If you want to share them out to the world, just like every other app out there, or that's on you. But yeah, I mean, this is something where we've got some pretty highly sensitive organizations that are using this day in and day out. So we take privacy with the utmost concern and seriousness. So
that's great. Well, good. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's early for you out in San Diego, so it's quite early for you out there. So I appreciate it.
No problem, Mike. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate our talk, and look forward to working with you.
Yeah, same here. I look forward to staying in touch and learning how we can keep incorporating this into different things we're doing. So thanks a lot, Craig.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Craig from TruePick. This is what I want to do is, as I said, that we talked about the primary research, and I wanted to devote this show to it because I can't emphasize it enough. And it's easy to say, oh, just go call people. And this is kind of the blocking and tackling of that, because I don't know if you heard, if you're a new listener, you wouldn't have, but if you've listened to them, I forget. But earlier when I started doing the podcast, I had mentioned how that one of the hardest things for me to do over the years, and I'm still terrible at it, is really a way to memorialize my work. And I would have notebooks all over the place, scattered. And I think I think I mentioned on the podcast how we were doing some spring cleaning, and years worth of my notebooks disappeared. And I had tried doing all the typing on a laptop when I was talking to people on the phone, and I'm just not good at it. So, and I get and trying to keep track of the work is hard, right? Because you're looking at a number of different companies and you're writing notes, and it's not easy. And one of the things I did start doing, and I really started it probably about a year ago when I really started writing a newsletter, is I started really writing my thoughts down. Because on the buy side, as a hedge fund analyst and as a portfolio manager, you're writing numbers down, and you're doing you have your notebooks, but the story jumps to life for me from doing my spreadsheets. I don't fall in love with them, but I take all the information I learn, whether it's industry conditions, what's the pricing environment like, what's the growth rate of the industry, how much units can a company expect to sell, is there a new product life cycle that's coming, or do they have a product life cycle that's coming to an end that could affect their growth rates? What's going on in the raw materials and the cost of goods sold? Is there anything unusual that's going to cause something there to cause the cost side of the profit and loss statement to get out of whack, right? And so when I'm out in the field talking to people, I use that information I learn to help form my views to what to enter into my spreadsheets. And then it's just math, right? It's some formulas you put into a spreadsheet, and then it kind of, from there, it tells me what I think the growth rates could be, the earnings could be, the margins could look like. But that all starts somewhere else. And the way we talked about earlier, you can start that by getting company guidance, which the management teams will do on earnings conference calls, at conference presentations. They put out in press releases, and that's their view. Then there's your view and my view. And that's how the primary research role comes into play. But the blocking and tackling of it is you got to keep it straight. So what I started, so as an analyst or portfolio manager, the numbers do that. But there's all these conversations that you have. And a lot of times we'd go out and take pictures when you're in the field. Whether I'm in the shale fields in Williston, North Dakota, going out and visiting oil and gas rigs and visiting rail terminals. And I want to take photos so that I could remember where I was, what that was showing me, what it looked like. Am I looking at new homes? If I'm going out and looking at new home developments, do I see a couple built and others just sitting there with no lots being developed? Right, that helps. But if I take them and I stick them in my photo, I don't really remember where I put them in, right? Because I take it on my iPhone. Who uses cameras anymore? Take it on my iPhone, and I don't remember what year it was or where it was. But I had never really thought, is there an app that could really help me with that? But I started doing more of writing. When I started writing the newsletter, obviously you have to write. But I found that the writing really helped clarify my thoughts. So it wasn't just a mosaic of notes that I would have as an analyst and a portfolio manager, because so much of it was in my head. It was from my consumption. And if I was going to share it with the general partner who ran the firm, my last 7 or 8 years that I was with a big hedge fund, I didn't have to do a write-up for him or my other partners. We would just sit around in a room, talk about what we're working on. Here's what we like. Here's what we do. Here's what I'm going to do. And you'd bandy it back and forth, but you didn't have to memorialize it. for anyone who's just a bunch of professional investors sitting around talking, and you'd go and execute your trades and do what you needed to do. But with that, it's all innate. It's all in there, and there's so much information. You guys have your regular lives every day, right? You're not a professional investor. You've got your real world, and so how do you keep it all straight? Well, the newsletter for me is great because I really have to write down my thoughts and in one place, and it's a great research tool. So as you're developing and starting to learn about primary research and do more primary research, you're out in the field, right? You're looking at a consumer company. You go do store visits, or you don't have to make them store visit. You're out with your family. You're visiting somewhere, or you're on a business trip and you see something. You photo it and you catalog it, and it doesn't get lost in your iPhone photos. So for me, when I was introduced to Craig, I thought it was a very interesting tool, and the fact for my business, if I'm out somewhere, I can memorialize where I was, when I was, and that can't be manipulated, right? So I know now. I would like to know it. It jogs something in my brain, right? Now I'm not going to manipulate it, but I don't know that others who are presenting me research or others who are presenting me anything, they could say they were out of the mind visiting it. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Now, obviously, TruePick is new, and not everyone's going to have it, but there are things to now think about, right? So it's something I wanted to bring to you. It's part of the primary research process, just one of many tools that you can have. And so there is, I get 0 for having Craig on. There's no reason to have him on other than I thought it was very interesting. I have no involvement with the company whatsoever. But I do see that there's an interesting a tool that's out there. So this was a longer version. Normally the Hedge Fund Corner, where I talk about the process, is going to be maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes. I put this into a full session today because I think it's important. And when I look back through my career, and I look back to the biggest calls I've had on both the long side and short side, the best ones, really came with dogged, deep dive due diligence. Luck's involved sometimes. Timing, of course, is very important, but it really is peeling that onion back. And when you peel that onion back and you keep going and drilling down, and again, you don't need an MBA or a CFA for this. You need life skills. You need observational skills. You need curiosity. But that's where you're able to catch inflection points or catch truths or falsehoods. And I will regale you with stories over the coming weeks and months of how I have used primary research. And it's really for me, by the way, and I should say this, when I was starting out as an analyst, I didn't come from a fancy college. I came from a small commuter school. I started out at the University of Arizona, and then I wound up at a very small school in Long Island called Dowling College that went bankrupt 2 years ago. But for me, it was a great education. It was a great school, and I had a full-time job and went to school at night. And so when I was able to fight and claw my way into a hedge fund, unbeknowingly, that was not my goal, but once I realized I was there, then I had to fight and claw because I realized when I first got there, holy cow, there's some really smart dudes here. A lot of Harvard MBAs, Wharton MBAs who grew up wanting to do this, and I didn't. And I have a very good head for numbers. I had an accounting undergrad degree, but I wasn't trained to be a hedge fund analyst. So I realized, luckily, I have a dogged work ethic. To this day, I work. If I work less than 12 hours in a day, it's unusual. I'm probably working 15, 16. Work is what I do. I'm always reading. I'm always doing something, and so, and it's not work for me. It's love. It's joy. I enjoy it because it's constant learning. So, but I had the way I was able to prove my worth was to go out and investigate and prove that I could find information that was not readily available. And that's how you create value for the people in the hedge fund industry. You create value by going out and digging and finding information that is public but not being talked about, right? So you just have to go and search for it. And I think it's a critical part of investing. I often get asked in an email, what's your secret sauce? Or what, I want to trade this or trade. I don't know from that. I don't know from secret sauces. I know from finding a thesis that I think is interesting and then just going to work and layer by layer and putting that mosaic of information together to form an overall view. So anyway, so no investing ideas this particular show, but I think if I could impart anything on you, I want it to be, think about incorporating primary research into your stock picking. And as we go, I'm going to teach you how to do that. So I hope you enjoyed the show. I will be back next week, same time, same channel. Have a good week.
The information presented on Talking Stocks Over a Beer is the opinion of its hosts and guests. You should not base your investment decisions solely on this broadcast. Remember, it's your money and your responsibility.